So this is a time that I can give the Dharma talk, and the title is How to Find Equanimity When Everything Seems to be Going to Pieces. And indeed, this is a time of huge struggle and uncertainty and conflict, and it touches all of us. There are wars being fought all over the world, and I'm in the middle of one right here where I sit. But there's tragedy and war in the Ukraine, in Sudan. There is divisiveness in the streets of London and New York. And there's more conflict in our daily life, with our family, where we work. There's just tends to be more insecurity and conflict, and it's growing. And it can make us feel quite agitated and anxious and somehow lose our ground. And we really need at this time to find a refuge, shelter from the storm. Many people today find it hard to practice. They're practicing meditation and other spiritual practices, but they feel very agitated. They can't settle, and they find it hard to actually meditate as well. It affects all of us in different ways, sometimes deeply unconscious in hidden ways. And then we have this duality. One of the women in the center, small center in my village, said, I don't know how to hold the duality. I feel the aliveness of the trees that when I walk, and the meditations and the beauty of nature, and then the rockets, and I feel so small and afraid and contracted. And then again, when I meditate and I'm walking through the olive trees, I feel open and alive and a spiritual soul. And how do I work with the two? Expanded awareness and contracted, afraid person. How do I work with the two of them? And it's a real question for all of us and not easy. Personally, I've been through 1 year of rockets from the Lebanon, passing over, falling around, sirens constantly. And I've practiced many, many years, and I have kind of built a pretty good equanimity over all those years of practice. But I have to say that in September, there was 2 weeks when I felt that my equanimity was contracted, was reduced. And it was as if it was like my dogs. Every time there was a rocket, I felt in my bones, in my body, a reaction. My nervous system was triggered all the time, just like my dogs. My dogs are barking, and I felt triggered by the bangs and the booms in a very, very primal way. And I realized I'd lost equanimity, that there was a place in me that was triggered and reacting from the nervous system biologically. And I did then just realize I had to really work with this. So I spent 2 weeks, got every day 2 or 3 hours of meditation in the morning, and meditation on spaciousness, on a big consciousness, like coming back into space. And it worked. And then the triggering was stopped. But this sadness is still there. And equanimity is not about shutting down your feelings, or your nervous system, or your heart, or the pain of life. It's not about neutrality. I have to say something that will maybe make this talk one that you might never forget. And it was something that happened about half an hour ago. And you don't know, but there were sirens all around. And it happened to be at the moment when I said to all of you, okay, let's take 5 minutes of quiet. So you didn't know that. I disappeared because I went under the table, because it's the only place I could think of when we don't have shelters in these houses in this alternative village. We never built shelters. So I went under the table and while you were meditating, but it was so painful to me. And when I came out of the table, from under the table after a few minutes and gave guidance to say, okay, now open the eyes. You didn't realize, but I was crying a few tears. Because it's an impossible situation. Because the pain is too big. And it's the pain of the people in Gaza and the pain of the human beings that get themselves lost in such a situation. And it's the pain personally and the pain of all of us and the pain of samsara and the pain of the madness of people that inflict such suffering on each other. But I have to say that the Buddha was so clear that dukkha, or suffering or pain, you have two choices. You have the choice of going into despair and misery, or the choice of waking up. Pain is the big wake-up call. And this is what I was trying to, in the last year, trying to work with every rocket and bang and boom in the whole area as a wake-up call. It's like every bang, a stick of a Zen master. Wake up now. Life and death. Wake up now. The Zen master stick. But it's very much in the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, which is that one of the beautiful teachings of the Buddha, not to be in chasing rainbows, not to be in sense of believing in beyond and so on, but to see why is the human being or animal or any being born in a body, where does the suffering come from, and what to do with it? And it's so real and down to earth. And the Buddha said, every bit of suffering is an invitation. It can be huge, like war, and it can be small, like an argument with someone close to you, your neighbor or your family. Doesn't matter. So what is the wake-up call? The first thing to be aware of, and also fundamental, the wake-up call is to our fundamental existential vulnerability, our basic vulnerability. And here is a relief right at the beginning, because if we see that our vulnerability and our suffering is because we're born in a body, that the universe, which is infinite, kind of produced a body, call it Stephen or call it David, produced a body. And it produced a body with a kind of mission called survival. So everybody, whether it's an ant or a virus or a human being, has a pressure to survive. And from there comes all the suffering. Inside the universe, in infinity, there's no need, there's no suffering. It's just existence. And the suffering is because, and by the way, life isn't suffering. The universe isn't suffering. sometimes misreading of the First Noble Truth of the Buddha. Life isn't suffering, but once we are born in a body, there will be suffering at some point. We can't avoid it because of the pressure to survive. And what's the pressure to survive? To change our conditions all the time. We are busy eating and needing and drinking and having to have love and having to have support and having to have safety and having to change conditions to make ourselves comfortable. And we are faced with circumstances which we have no control. And it's that leads to the suffering. I mean, just think of what's been going on the last while. There's been viruses sweeping the world. There's been conspiracy theories, and they are getting worse and worse, sweeping the world. There is war sweeping the world. Then we're not in control. And it creates suffering which is not in our hands. And thankfully, we don't have to take that so personally. It's being born in a body and being part of samsara. And it's really important that all of us, that we are touched by suffering, but we don't have to take it personally. It is samsara. It is bigger than us. Samsara, I don't know if you know the word, it means the wheel of life. It means what happens when we're born in a body. And basically, samsara is not fixable. We can't undo it. Unfortunately, we all want to stop. This just reminds me of from Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh was climbed up the tree to get the honey at the top, and then a branch broke, and he fell onto another branch, and he went oof, and he fell onto another branch and went ow. He fell on down another branch, boom, 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 ooh, ow, no, stop, ow, ooh, boom, boom, and he got to the bottom of the tree with another big boom. And the philosophical side of Winnie of Pooh said, "It's all because I like honey so much." There's a real, Buddhist take home. It's all because I like the honey so much. So we're a bit like that. We're trying to control things because we want the honey, and we cannot control things. So it really helps us to see that deeply and to let go into the uncontrollable. And then we don't have to be at blame for feeling afraid and lost at times of war and conflict. Because we're sensitive human beings. We're sensitive. We're feeling the world. We're fragile, and we're shaking with the world, with the vibration of the world. And so we're afraid. We feel afraid. We feel lost. We feel anxious. We feel angry. It's okay. We don't need to blame ourselves. A mountain is only heavy if we try and lift it. It's not my phrase. I'm quoting a Buddhist teacher that said it. A mountain is only heavy if we try and lift it, if we allow ourselves not to be in control. A lot of relief from that. The Buddha said, life has no protector. Life has nothing of its own, and life needs to be left. That existential vulnerability is something which is a wake-up call for us. But we have something to do, which is go through it. The way out of that is the way through it. The way out is the way through. The doorway out is the doorway that we came in. So in a very, I say practical but non-practical way, one place that we can work in our lives and it's not just meditation, but many, many places, areas, is to remember, is our remembering that we are actually made of beautiful souls, that we have real beautiful souls. And here I have to say, the word mindfulness is not a good translation of the Pali sati. I'm not a scholar of Pali, but I do know this. I've been following the translations of mindfulness, and sati means remembering. And one of the places we remember to be aware, yes, that is classically in mindful. We remember to be present, but we remember our beauty. And we remember our big souls. We are extraordinary beings, sentient beings, sentience. We see the stars. We have moments of grace. We know joy. How many thousand? There's 37 people here together. How many thousands of books have you all read together? Thousands of books. It's in us. We have knowledge, we have thoughts, we have realizations, we have moments of grace. We have basic love. We have love of goodness as well. This is also very much in the tradition, or tapa, it's called in the Pali. Love of goodness. It's in our heart. We love goodness. We love the harmony. We love feeding ourselves and others. That's why there's pain when we feel violence, because we love goodness. We love non-violence. It's in us. So to remember here is quite a big thing. We do it through practices and meditations and so on, but also in our life. And one place where we forget is that we're swept away by the media, by too much information, by other people, by consensus. One of the most painful experiences for me in the last year is the sense of the we language, us, and made me, for a period, feel quite lonely. I'm talking about in Israel. The we language, and it's until today so strong and so dominant. Luckily, there's loads of people also like me who are not part of that we language, thankfully. But I felt it overwhelming. And I kept meeting it in the street. But then I kind of, after a couple of weeks, I said, no, I'm not going to let it depress me. I'm going to have my voice. I will speak my voice. And by the way, all of you, please speak your voice. Give your voice to the world. The world needs it. When everyone's talking in we language, us. But we have to win back our attention. Our attention is stolen by the media, is stolen by other people, is stolen by telephones and the intensity and conspiracy theories and whatever. So just to be aware that we need to win back our attention to ourselves, and that's remembering our big soul and remembering what's important. And that's a defense. That's a place where we really feel protected if we remember our big self. So some other directions now. I want to explore some other directions for building equanimity. And one place that we need to pay attention to is, I would call it first aid. And first aid is indeed to change circumstances. So it really can help to change the circumstances. Although equanimity is building protection inside, is not changing the externals. But still, we should be aware. Even just now, when I said our attention is stolen, so we can reduce the input. We can turn off the television, the telephones. We can reduce the amount of over information that we are drowning in information. That's external. That's protecting ourselves. That's finding a bit more space externally. And we can help others. This is a great first aid for ourselves and for others. But one of the places that I think is really very special as first aid is to remember the magic of small moments. How we go to the garden, walking in nature in the park, standing under a tree, growing our vegetables in a pot or in the garden, whatever, feeding other people, cooking. It's really very grounding. It brings us back to life. It reconnects us with life rather than all the stories, views. Here where we live in the north, and never mind the Rockets, every day I am in the vegetable garden. I have, we 30, 40 years, we grow our own food just in just for the family. And I'm planting and sowing the seeds and weeding every day. And it's just so important. And so the life point of view is, rather than the view of what I think, what I believe, what I don't agree, what I agree, what you should be, what shouldn't be, the life point of view, which is not a me point of view, is really important. I want to read to you a small piece from the book, which Kate mentioned that there's a book that I have out, but is coming out in a new edition in a couple of weeks, and in a new title called How to Thrive in Hard Times. It used to be called What's Beyond Mindfulness, but it will be called How to Thrive in Hard Times. I'll put it in the chat before the end of the session with us. So this is a small piece from this book. I live alongside lots of olive trees, which have an amazingly expressive character that shows everything that has happened to them. If a branch has been cut, or if the tree reaches out in a certain direction, or there are lumps on the trunk, you can see it. The shaping of the tree is its memory, a response to conditions. The tree doesn't have a problem with that. And there is no reason why we should have a problem either. We are also just shaped, constructed by life. We are given a body, and it develops and changes dynamically according to conditions. And we arrive in each moment as we are, and the world arises and meets us as it is. And all we need to do is to appreciate it and let it be. Stories are just stories. Narratives are just narratives. And embodiment is just embodiment. If we let go into this flow of life, the wounds will dissolve, the scars will be softened, and we will find ourselves in the garden of the now instead of the prison of yesterdays. A difficult experience can come up just like an unpleasant visitor arriving in our house. We can cry, but the next minute we can laugh, and then it's gone. Indeed, mindfulness is a powerful tool for that. And I want to again express what I said right at the beginning. 3 days before the Buddha died, he gathered his monks together and he said, be an island in the stormy seas. And according to Stephen Batchelor, he said that because the monks were getting swept away by the consensus, just like I was saying before about the we language. And apparently, according to Stephen, they were being swept away by the consensus, the society around, and he needed to give them encouragement to stand on your ground and be autonomous and be independent. And then he said, how do you do this? And the instructions he gave was being mindful of the life, this life in us, the truth of this moment, this breath, that's it. This feeling, that's it. This body, that's the experience. This is the truth of things right now. It's instead of all the kind of covering, denials, escapes, projections, blame. No, this truth, this moment, this is it. And it may feel a bit subtle. How can that give me a sense of being an island in the stormy seas? It can. And the mindfulness works like that because it gives us a ground in life, a ground to stand instead of all the projections and the building of stories and so on coming out of experience. And what we see in mindfulness is that things change and pass by. We see flow. A difficult experience, it goes, it changes by itself. And we develop a non-selective awareness, which is what holds us as an island. Being able to see pleasant, unpleasant, this and that, let it come, let it arise. I am ready. I allow this experience. I allow the next experience. As William Blake said, joy and woe, if we meet joy and woe, we safely go. Through life, we safely go if we know joy and woe. William Blake. So we meet the pain and also the joy with one step witnessing. So there are more specific practices that we can use sometimes, especially if if the difficulty is more significant. One classic way is to use phrases like mantras. So the three classic mantras of equanimity. May I accept things as they are. It's one basic mantra. May I not be disturbed by the coming and going of circumstances. My happiness or my unhappiness depends on how I am with the conditions and not on my wishes for myself. So the simplest and most direct, I think, is the middle one, is simply, may I not be disturbed by the coming and going of events. It's very simple. It's very direct. It works. If we say it a few times and it stays with us, we will have a kind of address in the mind. So that's a specific practice for equanimity, and there are more. Another one is three images of protection. One is the glass, which is experiences go through us. We are transparent. They don't stick in us. So we can have a difficult experience, but it doesn't stick, it passes through. Another is the rock, which is actually what we practiced before, like standing on the ground and remembering the earth underneath and feeling steadiness, a bit artificially, but it's still a meditation practice. And the third is the basket, that the wind blows the basket and it rolls over and over, but it doesn't get destroyed, and it's light. The basket is the Tao, is like the Tao, where wind makes the grass bend, but doesn't break it. It's events that go through, that happen to us, we fall over, but it doesn't knock us down. I have to say that it happened to me when I was just now under the table, when I felt the impossibility of the situation of teaching Dharma and having to go under the table because of sirens. And I felt the impossibility, but it was gone very quickly. It was the basket. The pain came and the pain went. And there is something which is very important. We can experience triggers. Someone can be angry with us and we can feel triggered, responding, defending. We don't try and shut that down, but we experience it and we see that it doesn't need to work in us. It doesn't need to have results. So we can experience difficulty, like I said, in the nervous system, but it doesn't do anything. I remember the other day, I was sitting next to two of my grandchildren that were fighting and shouting, and I did nothing. I just sat there quietly, listening to them shouting. I did feel it in my body, the anger. I felt it, but it didn't really do anything. It was just in the tummy, a kind of vibration. So after a while of 5 minutes of this, because I wasn't really triggered, or I was triggered, but it didn't do anything. I was able to turn to them with a smile and said, maybe it's enough now. And they both smiled and said, yes, yes, of course. Things don't need to work in us. We need to be clear, though, when things work in us and when they don't work, so that we know it, we can see it, we can feel it, we can say, okay, I got it, I understand, I see that happening, I see the constructions. For example, building a story of blame. It may be so tempting. We were dying to blame the politicians and blame them and blame whatever, Trump, and blame. But wait a minute, are we really helping with that process? And maybe it's better just to feel, if we feel some pain or contraction or triggering, and we say, you let it go. It doesn't help to build story. Another practice, and I'm talking here specific practices that help equanimity. Another practice is refuge that we talked about before. Our meditation, and it's something that is really important to understand. Most of you, I think, have had experience of mindfulness, but very often mindfulness is translated as paying attention. And we forget that mindfulness is also a power. It does things. It's not neutral. And one of the things that we can really experience mindfulness doing for us is showing us how to come back home. how to be held. And it shows us, remembering, like I said before, it shows us that we are already at home, but we forgot. We cannot be anywhere else. We are at home in this universe. We are made of the universe. We are belonging to the universe. But we don't notice it. It's very much like someone who's at home, but they don't know they're at home because they keep looking out of the window. What's out there that I need? But they forget that they're at home because they're looking out of the window at somewhere else. So meditation can really help us to feel belonging to life, back home into life. And in that case, we shouldn't worry too much about whether how many breaths and this kind of thing. It's not important. The sense of coming back home to ourselves, presence is enough. And this is something we can do in any part, wherever we are. We get on a bus or a train, we feel present. I'm coming home now on this train. So meditation as belonging, and it does help us, of course, to be in nature. Nature always helps, but we may not be able to control that. We may be living in London. Okay, this is the nature of things. I'm still belonging. I walk on this earth. I see a small flower between the pavement. I see the smile of a child. I see a cat on the doorway. I see the sky above. I see the clouds passing by. I see people doing their life. We're all together. We're all belonging. We're all at home. A really classical way of practicing equanimity is more interest in consciousness. And that can be a sense of spaciousness, more space. And I mentioned that for me was a meditation that it talks to me over years, and I'm very engaged in that kind of spaciousness of meditation. I won't go into it now, but the formless jhanas is partly my practice. But there's a very nice Zen story about that. A river, and there was a boatman. And he said to the boatman, "Take me across." And the boatman said, "Sure." So he started to row across, and in the middle of the river, another boat came and bumped into this boat. And the boatman shouted at the other boatman, "How do you not look where you're going? What an idiot you are." Then they went on. After another few meters, another boat came and bumped into them again. And this boat was empty. And the boatman didn't do anything. And the passenger said, "Well, you shouted at the first boat. Why didn't you shout at the second one?" And the boatman said, "Well, there's no one to shout at." And that's an important story. We can be empty, like the empty boat, with nobody to shout at. We can feel like an empty boat, that we're not disturbed because there's emptiness, because there's a consciousness which is bigger and less of a me that is defending itself all the time. That is classic spiritual journey. It doesn't matter whether it's Dharma or it's Sufism, doesn't matter. The replacing the me center with consciousness as awareness, as witnessing, we will automatically be less disturbed. There's more space inside. And when there's more space, we are less disturbed, we are less knocked over. And we feel lighter. And then it helps us to dance with uncontrollable circumstances, which we're not in control of. It can be seen as a little bit indifference. They're quite close, equanimity and indifference. We can feel sometimes water off a duck's back. I can't handle this. It's like the non-stick. Non-stick isn't equanimity, but sometimes we need it. Just what I said earlier about letting go of the over-information and having our attention stolen from us. Part of that is knowing our boundaries and saying, I'm a vulnerable human being. I can't cope with this. I will shut down the source of that disturbance. And it's okay. But slowly, we do less of it. We do less of indifference. We allow more to come in, but we're less disturbable. I mean, think about the meditation of thinking, of thought, working with thought. So we have a thought during the meditation, and I should be on my body, and there's these thoughts passing by, and what a nuisance, I'm being distracted by thought. Wait a minute. Thought is doing what it knows to do. It doesn't need to disturb us. Thought is doing what it needs to do, like the breath is doing what it needs to do. Thought is like music in the mind. We can let it play its music, even though it feels sometimes a bit like a cacophony, like terrible noise in the mind. Okay, but it's still our music. It's still doing what it knows to do. So working with thought and giving it another sense, coming to thought from a place of witnessing and more space and allowing things to be the way they are, that's already creating equanimity. If we can look at thought and say, let the mind do what it knows to do, we're already in equanimity. Because we also can look at life and say, let this virus do what it knows to do. Let this politician do what he knows to do. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't respond, but it does say how we do respond. How are we acting in the world? Of course we act in the world. Of course we take a medicine if we're sick. Of course we want to go out and help others because we have otapa. We have the goodness in our heart that wants to reduce suffering in the world. It's very basic. We love of goodness. So we go out and help others and help the world. But we have to do it in a way in which we are not stressed, disturbed, exhausted, but from a place of steadiness. And a final kind of place that equanimity, we can learn equanimity, we can develop equanimity, and it's more the spiritual or universal aspect of life. I'm thinking here of Bhagavad Gita. As you know, Arjuna found himself on the battlefield opposite his own family, and he was weakened. He couldn't move. He said, how can I try and kill my own family? And Krishna said, you're not in control of life. It's life that did it. So you just do what you need to do. So it's kind of a big, it's problematic, of course, but if we have a sense or that we're not in control, that the big picture is in control, that karma is in control, it's not us. We don't have to all the time think we have to choose. We have to decide. It's us on my shoulders to get the best solution. It's not. Sometimes we let go, we let ourselves be called, we let ourselves be guided, we let karma work through us. And a deep spiritual realization is that the world can't hurt us in the end because it's not against us. It's just itself. And we are the world. And so the world, if we are the world, then who can hurt whom? We are the world, so who's protecting from whom? We are it. We are the world. That's a deep spiritual realization, but it really helps equanimity. The causes and conditions. Causes and conditions. And so in the end, we need to let go, express ourselves, express our voice, act in the world without pressure of success or failure, without measuring, without exhaustion, without struggle, but offering ourselves to the world. And then we go home and rest and sleep well at night. Even if the world is collapsing, it's not on our shoulders. So what we can't hope to fix samsara, but we can express our inner world out into the world. We can express who we are. We can express our qualities. We can give our qualities. When people ask me after 20, 30 years of peace work, and look what's happening now, the Palestinians in a worse situation than ever, and war everywhere. And so you failed, didn't you? You didn't make peace. I said, no, I don't know if we failed or succeeded. All I know is that we held up a candle. That's all in the darkness. We had a candle. We gave people something. We gave people some positive sense of positivity, that there is another way of being. That's it. We cannot do more than that. And all of us, I think, will have to meet limits, but that doesn't stop us giving ourselves to the world. It's just natural. We just do it and then we let go of results.